For decades, when we've talked about poverty, it always seems to come down to one thing: a line, a specific income number. But what if that single number is actually hiding the real story about who gets left behind? Well, a new university study offers a powerful new way to see and even visualize the true structure of poverty in Malaysia.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we're not going to start with some big, boring national statistics. Nope, we're going right to the ground level, to a specific rural town that became the testing ground for this new research.
Okay, so here we are in Kuala Lipis. Researchers went in and did something pretty simple. They surveyed 100 people, just randomly selected. But here's the twist. They weren't asking how much money people made. They asked something much more basic, something that gets to the very heart of a community's economic reality. So let me ask you, put yourself in their shoes for a second. If you walked into this town and picked 100 people at random, how many of them would you guess have absolutely zero income? Not low income, I mean nothing, nada. The answer they found? 19. 19 people out of 100. That is, wow, that's almost 1 in 5 people in their sample with absolutely no money coming in the door, period. And this chart, it just lays it all out, doesn't it? You can see that divide so clearly. 81% of people had some kind of income, but that huge chunk, that 19%, had nothing. This is the group we're talking about, a level of deprivation that just gets lost when you only look at the big picture. Now, to really get why this new way of looking at things is such a big deal, we gotta zoom out. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? Malaysia has been fighting a war on poverty for over half a century. And man, what a journey it's been. It all kicked off back in the 70s with the new economic policy, all about rural development. Then you get the 80s and 90s, this massive industrial push, creating millions of jobs. Fast forward to the 2000s, and the strategy shifts to direct cash aid. Then the pandemic hits, and it's all about emergency relief. And now, today, the conversation is around these big structural changes, like targeted subsidies. Every era had a different playbook, but the goal was always the same: lift people up. But here's the thing, despite all that work, that 19% in Kuala Lipis, that tells us something's still being missed. And that is exactly where this university report drops its bombshell, a totally new lens for seeing the problem. They call it the Poverty Graphical Coding Map, or PGC map for short. Sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. The goal isn't just to slap a number on poverty. It's to actually visualize it, to create a map that shows you the structure, the pattern of who's getting left behind. And at the heart of this whole thing is a metric that is just beautifully simple. It's called the income presence ratio, or IPR. For a second, just forget everything you know about poverty lines. The IPR asks a super simple yes or no question. Do you have an income? That's it. It's just measuring the presence of money coming in, no matter how small. And calculating it? It's incredibly easy. Step 1, you survey some people. Step 2, if they have any income, you give them a 1. If they have 0 income, they get a 0. And step 3, the percentage of people with a 1, well, that's your income presence ratio. Dead simple. So back to Kuala Lipis. 81 out of 100 people had an income, so the IPR is 81%. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. According to the model's own rules, an IPR that high actually puts the town in the low poverty category. And that just makes you stop and think, doesn't it? If the model is telling us poverty is low, what do we do with the reality of the 19% who have nothing? It shows you that a single number can't possibly tell the whole story. We need to see the pattern. We need to see the community's economic DNA. And this is where we get to the most powerful and frankly coolest part of this whole study. This incredible new way to actually see the data. Boom, this is the income double helix. Just take a second and look at that. Every single black square is one of those 19 people with no income, and every white square is one of the 81 people who do have an income. All of a sudden, we're not talking about a statistic anymore. We're looking at a structure. Now, that helix shape, it's not just to look cool, it has a really deep meaning. Those two strands are all twisted together to show that the fates of people with money and people without it are completely linked. They're not two separate groups living in the same town, they're part of one single economic system. And here is the absolute key takeaway. The spiral moving upwards, that represents economic growth over time, but look closely. See how those black squares, those pockets of zero income, are still there at every single level? This visual shows us a really hard truth. Just because the economy is growing, it doesn't mean everyone benefits. A rising tide doesn't automatically lift all boats. You can have these pockets of extreme poverty just baked into the system no matter how much growth there is. Okay, so when you see something that powerful, you can't just leave it at that. A diagnosis like this demands action, right? So the report doesn't just stop there. It actually proposes real, concrete solutions based on what they found. It's about turning this data into real-world change.
And the recommendations get right to the heart of the problem, focusing on that 19%. They're talking about better job matching programs, connecting people to actual opportunities. Beefing up skills training so people are ready for today's jobs. Creating flexible work for students. And this is huge, supporting the informal and self-employed workers. And of course, strengthening those social safety nets for the people who just can't work.
This whole explainer, it really all boils down to one simple shift in how we look at things. We stopped asking how much, and we started asking if. Just measuring the presence of income, not the amount, it uncovers this whole hidden layer of who's truly vulnerable. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. What would this new lens, this poverty code, reveal about your own community? What hidden patterns might you find if you just looked?